our co-host, Ethan.
Hi, everybody. Ethan here.
And today our special guests are Chase and Nathan from Immersion Systems.
What's up, guys?
Hey, guys.
So we have a great episode today to bring to you. And we're going to be talking a little bit about everything, but immersion is definitely one of the central topics. These guys are great. I met them in Texas, actually, and visited their facility. I don't know, was it like maybe over a year ago? And
like early 2018.
Yeah. And I think you guys were, you kind of had some immersion and some air, but you've definitely expanded since then. And I know it's been really exciting year for you guys.
Absolutely. It's been a lot, but it's been fun.
Yeah.
So can you tell our audience, like, how did immersion come about? Like, what's the backstory there?
You want the long version or the short version?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll do the short version for this podcast.
Short version? Okay. Short version, we got hacked, and the hacker, this was like 2016, the hacker said, hey, you got to pay me in Bitcoin. We didn't know what it was. We had to figure out that whole thing, bought some on Coinbase, paid the hacker. He was a legitimate hacker, and he sent us the keys to unlock all of our like legal files and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a story.
So that's what I'm saying. That we can go. This is a deep rabbit hole. We can go if you want.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad you guys got hacked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. It's actually worked out great.
I mean, it's changed your life in a lot of ways, and I think it's kind of amazing that something nefarious like hacking is what got you to be at center stage. You guys are kind of what I consider the leaders in your area. So
thanks.
Yeah, that's that's just phenomenal how something negative can turn into such a positive.
I know.
Oh.
It was crazy. Like, what was that?
I said most profitable hacking.
Yeah. So whoever that white knight hacker is out there, thank you for getting me in a Bitcoin.
Why don't you just first tell us a little bit about yourselves personally? Chase, you're the owner or one of the owners, and then Nathan.
Yeah, sure. So Chase Blackman, 35 years old. I have a wife and two boys. I call them Double Trouble. 3 and 7. But they're good kids. But you know how boys can get when they're locked up at home in quarantine for a couple months.
Oh yeah,
like us boys here.
Yeah. And then my brother and I started Immersion Systems with our other business partner, Chris Jacobs. He's our COO. We started that back in, I want to say Immersion Systems started like early 2018 or late 2017. And it was just a side project while we had our main focus was on our family business, Blackman Mooring and BMS Cat. And then, so that's it about me.
Now it's my understanding that the backstory here is you guys considered the reason why you came up with the idea of immersion is because of your location. Your location has some pretty hot weather, and you guys were investigating alternative ways to regulate the temperature of these miners, and that's when you really considered immersion. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, but what about Nathan? You forgot about him.
I want to hear Nathan's personal story.
Oh, okay.
Chase is more interesting anymore.
No. I'm just a dude.
So 2017, got into Ethereum. Actually, one of my friends in college, we'd done a lot of like trading together and stuff, and he told me that I needed to look into Ethereum at $4, and I said that's gambling. I don't understand it. So, so he put in 10 grand at $4, and then I got in at $35, and so he's a multi-millionaire, tens of millions of dollars because of this, and I'm upset about that. Not for him, for my own sake, but so I got pretty in depth and dove down the rabbit hole and started a crypto company for tax and compliance in my senior year of college, raised a couple million, and then sold it a couple years later. Then I joined a company that did B2B. Under the exact same thing, but basically it was businesses instead of consumers. So that was called Blocks, phenomenal company. Chase and Cameron was a client because I explored the mining vertical. I thought it was the most tangible, real use case for the product, and explored that. And then I just got obsessed with mining. I was like, there's all these inefficiencies, and like there's so many ways to control these inputs that can make it super profitable. I just really loved it. And then Chase and Cameron were like, oh, well, we're exiting from our company. And actually at the time, they didn't even tell me that yet. They were just like, hey, are you interested in really going into mining? And I was like, yeah, I am. So, we had a couple drinks and talked down at Mining Disrupt, and just hit it off culturally and backgrounds and all that stuff. And, we just kind of hit the ground running, moved to Texas.
Yeah. Mining Disrupt. Yeah, that's a great place to meet people.
For sure. Yeah, that was kind of like a pivotal time for us down at Disrupt, because we were in serious negotiations to sell BMS, and Cameron and I were kind of in this place. We're like, well, I'm not really sure if we want to do immersion systems as a business. So we didn't know if the market was going to be very accepting of it, because I'm sure y'all know the stigma about immersion has been it's too expensive or it doesn't work or whatever. And so we were going to have to try to change this sentiment about what we do as a business, really give it a go before people would even start to take it seriously. And so we're like, I don't know if I want to do that or not. But sure enough, Disrupt. No, sorry.
Disrupt? What?
Disrupt was the
phone disrupted. It obeys his commands.
Yeah. Sorry, wifey. I love you. I'll call you back in a minute. But at Mining Disrupt, that's when we didn't have a booth. We didn't really do anything. We just kind of walked around and talked to people and shook hands and handed out cards. And that's where we saw a ton of interest from people. I think it was the last night of we were up on the rooftop kind of bar thing or whatever. There was literally a line of people waiting to talk to us. We were like, okay, maybe this is actually a business we can do something with.
Hey, I remember that day very clearly. That's the day when my blood sugar crashed, and I was getting real mad at people. If we go back to that episode where we had Crypto Nando on our podcast, he told the story. So that's anyway. Talking about blood sugar, we were talking about blood sugar, before we went live here today.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's awesome. To hear your story. And then, before we continue, Nathan, what do you do for Immersion Systems?
Me?
The money guy?
So it was
you're a point of contact, right?
Yeah.
He's the face.
Do business development and sales. It was super simple. Chase and Cameron were like, I don't know if we should do this project, and I don't know if we should really go into it. And I was like, you're telling me that your product just makes people more money? And they were like, yep. And I was like, all right, I need to see a spreadsheet out. And I broke it all out, and I was like, oh, these numbers totally work. You can't talk to the small guys. You need to go to the multi-billion-dollar private equity funds. You need to go to the industry leaders. And then you just need to extrapolate out, and you need to be talking to the CFOs of the company and discuss the free cash flow versus, just, hey, does it make sense? Does it cool? What is the extrapolated out financial benefit? And so,
so it's a completely different conversation at that level than your typical, smaller miner that might have 10 miners or 100 miners. You're talking. Okay. So one thing you're saying about immersion definitely is that it makes sense in scale then.
I think it makes sense only at scale, to be honest. If you're talking about the large financial benefit, and there's a lot of constraints, whether it's the dry coolers or any other economically sound piece that needs to be on a megawatt by megawatt basis. But in general, we realized very quickly that we only want to sell a product that actually benefits people. And so we, decided very quickly that we could not do anything lower than 1 megawatt. And as we got busier and busier, that went really up to about 2.5 megawatts, right? That was the constraint of the dry cooler. And so definitely makes sense, break evens, everything. You actually are making your money back before the air mine, because it's that much more efficient and the effectiveness of the increased hash rate. But there's larger companies that don't have that free cash flow balance. We'll tell you right now from like day one that it costs more money to start.
Yeah.
But 6 months, 7 months out, all the money's paid back. And then from that point, it's just kind of gravy train, because you pay back and you're just making more money.
Yep. Is that the ROI timeframe that you try to shoot for, is 6 to 7 months? Is that kind of your ideal?
Well, so there's
very dependent on the Bitcoin price.
Right. So. Right now, it's maybe 11, 12 months.
I think that it's better to say that it's generally about 3 to 4 months faster than air. Because those things are both moving targets, but the increased efficiency and the increased revenue in the form of like firmware hash rate increase, those things are moving alongside and dancing with air versus immersion. So no matter what, we're always going to be better than air.
You're always going to
also have those levers to pull of like, when crypto's going real hard, you can crank everything to the moon and not worry about the efficiency. When crypto's going down, you have the ability to put it into low power mode and make your cost to produce Bitcoin. So it allows a lot of like financial flexibility that also, the larger funds really appreciated.
Yeah. So. And then, a lot of times, like sometimes we take this into consideration when you're pricing out a project and sometimes not. But if you're able to overclock your machines, anywhere from 30 to 50 to 60%, like overclock, depending on what type of machine it is, that basically directly correlates to how much power that the miner uses, right? Because it's watts per hash. And
double the clock is double the power, roughly.
Right. Okay. So if you can get to your max capacity, let's say that you have 10 megawatts, and normally you would need however many S17. We'll call it 1,000 S17s for easy math. Well, all of a sudden, if you can overclock all of those miners, you don't need 1,000 anymore. You only need 600 of them to get to your max total capacity. And so, as everyone knows, the number one line on the mining budget are the actual miners themselves. It's not the building. It's not the cooling system or any of that. It's the miners. So when you take that into account, the fact that you need 30 to 40% fewer miners, like in upfront capex, you almost reach like pure cost parity. So.
It was super funny for Bitmain and a couple of the other hardware manufacturers to realize that too, because we flew down Jeff Jinsu. He came to Texas for the first time to visit us for a strategy session. And we were like sitting literally in Chase's office. And, there's a little bit of a language barrier, but basically he was like, so what you're telling me is you need less miners. And I was like, yeah, but we can mine in locations that you couldn't mine before, so we're opening the globe for you. And he was like, okay, that's fine.
That I can work with. All right.
Yeah. I mean, it really makes sense when you think about the capital expense of, maybe setting up and installing 2,000 miners versus set up and installing 1,000 and getting the same capacity or the same hashability. That's just phenomenal. That's amazing.
Did you just call it a new word?
Ability.
No, that's a real word.
Yeah.
Density, right? Or
hash density or hash capacity.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Yeah, that's what we run into all the time, right? Like, so if you overclock your miners on the same infrastructure, you got a 30 amp breaker, you overclock them, boom, you blow the breaker. So you got to make sure that you're taking that into account, that as you overclock them, they will absolutely consume more power.
So obviously one thing you guys have to think about a lot in Immersion is the firmware. And I know you guys have been tinkering a lot with that. Just because, one of the first things people ask is, well, I need to be able to control the fans. That's like the biggest thing with Immersion, right?
Yeah.
Can you guys just speak to that a little bit about what you've done with firmware and what your thoughts are on that?
Sure. So I don't know if anybody knows this, but we have our own custom firmwares for the S9, S15, S17, S17 Plus, What's Minor, M10, M20, M30S, and that all of our clients basically get all that they get that for free. That's actually why we have all these firmwares in the first place, is because we need them for immersion.
Yeah.
Right. Like putting little emulators on each of the miners is just not like a great solution to move forward. But when you control the firmware, you can control the frequency and the voltage, and you can overclock them and stuff like that. So it's a dual purpose, both for the fans and for overclocking or underclocking, given the situation. But so yeah, we do have our own firmwares, and it's been an interesting ride. Back in the day, the S9 firmware was relatively easy to get into, and then Scott, I know you were involved with
the S750 or S15s.
Yeah, S15, the James and White Rabbit, and all that. They did all the testing here at my facility, and I can't really claim any. I didn't do any coding legwork on that, other than they're like, "Hey, hackers, here, have this one. I will sacrifice this unit to the wind to defeat the SSH API blocking or whatever the Bitmain was trying to do," and that worked out. So that allowed the work that James and White Rabbit did allowed folks like Vinesh and MSK and all those other guys to actually do their job, to go out and make, new firmwares and stuff like that. So, I'm very, very grateful to that group for doing that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you had a question in there somewhere that I didn't answer, though. I feel like
I can't remember.
Not answer.
That was 2 minutes ago. I can't remember anymore.
I've got a question for you guys. So, I mean, we obviously know that immersion cooling evacuates heat far more efficiently than air. So there's a benefit there. By having to use, the immersion system, you've had to come up with lots of other secondary solutions, such as the ability to get in and regulate the fans and, control the firmware and the clocking frequencies. What other things do you guys do to just totally maximize your profit?
Yeah, well, one of the super cool things as we've grown, it's gotten easier to work with the hardware manufacturers because we've purchased thousands of machines, some of those thousands with you, Scott. So, we have gotten to the point where, hey, this is a routine buyer of business, doing larger orders across different manufacturers for different reasons. And that's allowed us to have a communication link of just like, hey, you guys want, millions to tens of millions of dollars of business. You need to work with us on a solution. And it's gotten also to the point now where directly from the assembly line, we can work with these manufacturers to take the fans off or to make things specifically for immersion. And it's really hard to convince, Bitmain or What's Mine or any of the big guys that you're like, hey, this is very serious. So we had to go through the grunt work of, taking off thousands of fans and multi-million-dollar deals, go through that hoop first for them to believe that we actually, are doing what we said we did, or would do. But as far as the maximization of profit and everything, I mean, we are a white glove service, a very professional service that is allowing end-to-end solutions to minimize cost and provide, the most benefit to the client. Immersion is one of those things, but, we also are working with the hardware manufacturers to ensure that, they have direct touch points to their sales associates and, get exactly what they need in order to make their mine optimal. The firmware that we've done internally need simply because what the frequency and voltage specs are for immersion are different than air. And we have both of them, and we've, fine-tuned both of those, and we can, distribute both of those. However, we need it specifically for immersion. So whether it's, the site locations itself, we help people find those so we can build it into the model. We have, a bunch of different sites that we allow people for, genuinely sub 3 cent power all in cost, because we want our clients to be returning to us, right? That's how you build an empire, and that's how you build, year over year business. And we believe that this is a 10, 15-year business at minimum. And so whether it's the site location or the hardware itself, the infrastructure, Chase literally, goes out and flies to Canada or, surveys sites for people, making sure that everything is up to standard. And, So we have a consulting arm there. It's really, and we love doing what we do. It's fun. I mean, making money is awesome, but we have a blast when we do it.
Yeah.
We play to win. And, when I joined the team with Chase, that was one of the first things he said. He was like, no matter what, man, we play to win. And so, money's second. Number one is making sure the customer is taken care of. Number two is we're going to beat everybody else at this game. So.
I'm wondering, is there anything like after you've got everything set up, what about like what pools you connect to or how you guys manage that end of it? Because, just setting everything up is one aspect to it, but then you've got to manage the other aspect.
Right.
For
Yeah.
sure.
So,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Nathan. Go ahead.
well, so with I'm just going to touch on relationship that we have specifically with NovaBlock, which is our pool of choice. And then I think that, and I have no idea, but Chase can go directly into all of the reasons why he loves it so much. He talks about it on a basically weekly basis. So, but from our experience, NovaBlock's our partner. They've always been extremely transparent, and I've actually worked on building out some mines with them. Yuki, as well as her team, specifically Vincent from NovaBlock, have been a breath of fresh air when it comes to just radical transparency and understanding also implementation of different tools that Chase has asked for. So we have nothing but good things to say about that team. Chase.
Yeah. Chase, can you tell us more? I'm interested.
Sure. So when we were first talking to NovaBlock about some of the projects that they're working on, their own mining projects, they were saying, hey, we'd really like for you guys to mine in our pool. And so I connected to it and tried it for a little bit. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. But if y'all did, this, that, and the other, that'd make it a lot more valuable for me. So like merged mining was one thing. So they implemented merged mining, so you can not mine Namecoin, NMC, and I think they're still working on Syscoin and some of the other ones. But it's just one of those little added value benefits that's just kind of nice. Like your same hash power is netting you something more than you would anywhere else.
Sure.
They're also PPS plus, meaning that there's not many folks are on PPLNS anymore, but the NovaBlock actually assumes the risk in paying you, because if NovaBlock's not hitting the blocks, they're paying you anyway. And they have a very low fee, compared to a lot of the other PPS plus pools. It's usually 3% and higher for a PPS pool. PPLNS means that the pool assumes no risk. They only pay you if they hit blocks. And so, sometimes you can win or lose, but for most folks who are expecting a steady stream of income from mining, PPS or PPS Plus is the way to go. And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think NovaBlock does not charge you for the transactions, the transaction fees. Don't hold me to that. I'll have to double check it, but I think that's true.
Well, let me we'll take a look at their website here.
Yeah, let's give a big shout out. A big shout out to our sponsor, NovaBlock. And, you heard it from these guys down here. NovaBlock's all about transparency, and they are moving hash rate from China to North America. And, this is how in such a short time they've become so big. And, you heard it from Chase. I mean, the PP, what is it? PPS, paper share?
Yep. PPS.
The paper share. And they do it, paper share plus, meaning that it's based off of just mathematics. It's not, random luck, which pool can break which blocks or whatever. Scott's up here. He's going to show you guys how to get a good deal with them.
Yeah. So,
sure.
We just thank you, NovaBlock, for sponsoring our podcast. It really helps us to be able to produce this kind of content and put it out there. Just to say, this wasn't planned. NovaBlock is our sponsor, and Immersion Systems is a guest on this podcast. So anyway,
we really do use NovaBlock for all of our stuff. I swear.
Yeah, they're not
our clients' mines, as well as our mines we own as well.
Yeah. So at novablock.com, if you register, you just have to type in OFFORD18 in the invitation code, and that will give you a permanent reduction in your pool fees down to 1.8%.
Nice.
And we always like to also say that, hey, if you do have a lot of hash power that you want to move over, give it a try. You might even be able to get a little bit lower than 1.8%. I'm sure you guys probably have a little bit lower.
No comment.
We got a lot of clients,
things, right? Like, you got a bunch of clients, and we're all, offering this hash to the pools. Yeah, if you have more hash power, you have more negotiating room. So it's just something that all works together. So
yeah,
and that's one of the many things that miners can do to optimize their operation, like to minimize their costs. Like, your pool fees. A lot of folks don't even think about that. Like, well, that's a couple percent right there that you can save by doing things differently. Or a lot of folks just point to a pool because they like the philosophy of it. Like a lot of people, and I have nothing against them, but they're still using slush pool.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, I was a fan of slush pool too, but not anymore for other reasons we don't have to get into. So
we don't
do your own research. But there's other things you can do too. Like Nathan could talk more intelligently about this than I can, but like the cost of capital. If you need to borrow money, there's very clever ways to structure getting that money. Your electrical rate. At what scale does it make sense to where you can actually start going and negotiating with these power companies for lower, cheaper electricity?
You're definitely seeing a industrialization of mining that you have to be, and sorry for everybody that's a consumer miner out there, but post halvening you have to be, I think, sub 3.5 cent power to really have a competitive edge, and that's not really possible unless you're putting millions of dollars into capex and infrastructure. And so I think that we're seeing right now just we will see from the capitulation, a consolidation of all of the miners, and you're just going to see the industry leaders, push further, and people with really strong balance sheets are going to be the ones that can weather the storm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, talking about that cheap power, you guys are obviously talking about finding locations and different places that have cheap power. What kind of power are you guys working with?
So it depends, right? We look for reliability, uptime. We also look at geopolitical risk and landscape. We also look at, what the open forward market price is on the landscape of energy itself. Like oil and gas went to negative $36 WTI yesterday.
Yeah.
For oil. If you literally could go and grab the barrels of oil, they would pay you $31 or whatever it was per barrel to take them, because they don't have the inventory and stuff. And so it's very movable, it's very flexible. I will say specifically Texas, and its own grid that it has allows for power that can scale. And I'm not just talking specifically flare gas, that's all cool and stuff, but we're talking about scalable 10, 20, 50, 100 megawatt plus, power. That can happen in Texas, and that can happen reliably and cheaply. There's also some places in Canada that can do that too. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Texas is primarily oil and gas, but it's also shifting to wind and solar a lot. People don't know how big wind and solar is in Texas. So the overall grid and landscape of Texas, there's a lot of sun, there's wind, there's oil and gas, and that's all connected in a forward market. So we think there's a reason why you just see, more and more and more people coming to Texas across continents as well.
Yeah.
And it's all connected. I don't know if folks really know that or understand that, but like Texas is its own isolated grid. They have their own like governing body that manages like the real power consumption. It's called ERCOT, ERCOT. And it's very interesting, like when California has brownouts and stuff like that, Texas can actually sell California power if they want to, at increased rates and stuff like that. But there is a ton of like excess energy in Texas, and the biggest problem in Texas for mining folks is that it's too darn hot. 4 or 5 months of the year, it is just scalding hot, and that's where immersion systems comes into play. So they're able to weather whatever, throw it in the middle of the Sahara. We could probably figure out a way to mine there too.
So then it's fair to say that you guys, as a company, aren't really exploring the flare gas at this point.
We've looked at it. I wouldn't say that we're not exploring it. There's a lot more to it. I would say there's a lot more to it than just pull up a generator and start mining with flare gas, right?
Sure.
So working through that is a bit of a headache, but there are folks that we're talking to that are currently navigating that landscape, and we're always open for hearing what people got. So it's fine.
If people are, in short, and maybe too transparent here, but if people are willing to put their CapEx in the form of R&D into it, we're happy to help them and work together in a joint venture. However, if you're looking at the opportunity cost, which we luckily get a lot of opportunities because of the heat and where we can go that other miners can't, it was just not the right opportunity at the time for us. However, you have these very large oil and gas companies that get negative rates that they get. It costs them to flare. For them, it makes sense, and I think that we're going to see that happening further and further along in the years to come, because they don't care about Bitcoin. I hate to say it, it's not a big enough market for them, but they care about the fact that they can decrease their bottom line expenses by converting it to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's just a kicker.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I've got a question for you guys. Obviously, immersion systems help out in very harsh environments, very hot environments, sea, salt, water environments where it's not ideal to blow air through machines. How does it perform, or can you tell us a bit about how it performs in very cold environments? Because especially when talking about stranded gas, sometimes, these containers go out in places that are so cold, they literally have to be preheated before they can even turn the miners on. So what do you guys know about that?
Yeah, it's a similar situation with immersion and being in like a very frigid climate. So the fluid itself, we use BitCool by the guys at Engineered Fluids. Gary Testa and David Sundin, they're good friends, and we've known them for a long time, and they're awesome guys. If anyone has any interest in just learning about what they're up to, I'd recommend you reach out to them. So the fluid itself, BitCool, is a non-Newtonian fluid, meaning that it does not crystallize. So unlike water, it will not freeze up in pipes and blow up and like the pipe expand and stuff like that. Now, that being said, it will slow down a lot. It'll congeal, basically.
It'll get thick.
It'll get real thick.
Like honey being pushed past your miners.
Yeah. So in order to fire up a completely cold immersion system, where it's negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit outside, or negative 20 Celsius or something, then you have to preheat it. And that's really not that big of a deal, because there's plenty of plumbing. You just run, electrical heaters down. It warms it up, and as soon as there's enough heat in the system to basically not have the pump freak out and die on you when you turn it on, everything's fine. So, and it's really pretty easy to do, because if you just turn the miners on, they're going to generate their own heat. That kind of starts everything moving, and you just have those electrical. Thermal
thingies.
Yeah, the thermal strips. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
Yeah, these heater things.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah. I want to call it thermal couple, but that's not. That's the sensor.
The flux capacitor.
I'll think of it. Sorry. Yeah. I sometimes forget words.
All right. So you can utilize immersion systems in cold environments with just a little bit more preparation is basically what you're saying. Just make sure that it's at a certain temperature before you turn on the miners. Mm-hmm. I've also heard that miners tend not to perform as well in the cold. They kind of like to be in a very specific temperature range to get the maximum performance out of them. Correct.
So that's very true. So one of the things that we quickly learned when we started immersion systems was that, our goal was to try to get the miners as cold as possible, because in my entire life, all of my experience with building computers, I've been building computers since I was like 10, has been, if the colder I can get my computer, the better it will perform, the less energy it will consume. And if you look up what a semiconductor is and like the natural properties and how it interacts with heat and electricity and the gates and all that stuff, it'll make sense. But as semiconductors heat up, they just use more power. That's what it is. The short version of that. So we were trying to make sure that we were getting it as cold as possible. Well, come to find out that they don't like being that cold. So we had to loosen the cooling system up a little bit, give it a little bit of wiggle room to where it could heat up, because these chips are tested, at a certain and tuned at a certain temperature. And like for the Bitmain machines, for the most part, it's 80 Celsius. I believe miner is about 86 Celsius. And that's where they're most comfortable. So does that mean that you need the whole tank and all that to heat up to 80 Celsius? No, that just means you have to fine tune the flow like across the tank to make sure that as the fluid comes across the hash boards, that those chips are able to get up to roughly 80 Celsius. You don't want the whole thing, cooking at 80. You just want it to be able to go across, reach 80, and then exit the tank.
Now, we all kind of consider fluid and electronics kind of a big no-go. Like, a lot of people don't feel comfortable with that. Can you explain to our listeners out there, what kind of safety features do you guys have built in? I know from my research that if I actually had a choice between air and immersion, I would choose immersion because it's much more safer than air.
It is.
But can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So the fluid it's a dielectric fluid, meaning that it is that does not conduct electricity. Now that being said, the first time that we poured fluid on one of our sweet baby S9s, right? They were gold back in the day, right? Like, oh no, we're gonna destroy this thing. The first time we pouring gallons of fluid on this thing, I was like, this is a terrible idea. What are we doing?
I'm sure you've destroyed a few.
But no, it's perfectly fine. So we get that fear from water, because we know that water, the liquid, if you pour it on something, fire and all sorts of issues. But it doesn't conduct electricity. So it has roughly the same density as water. So it's about 1,600 times more dense than air. And that pretty much directly correlates to 1,600 times more heat capacity. The same amount of the fluid can remove that much more heat. But what was the question again? Sorry,
I was just talking about how it's safer for for the sense that it doesn't burn. It's non-flammable. My understanding is, and things in the open air, the wiring harnesses and the plastic on the wires itself, that stuff's flammable and it'll burn.
Oh, for sure.
So there's a couple things. There's a material compatibility list, which you can go against the miners. So in our experience, Bitmain and What's Miner have been very safe for these things because of their component list. Secondarily, Chase was telling me, which I thought was hysterical, he got a credit from the fire marshal because as a flame suppressant for the BitCool insurance company. And so that was super funny. But the third is it's just more control with air and not having that density. The same thing too, we're trying to cool it down. I guarantee you with that density, if you wanted to flip it the other way, you could heat it up a lot harder because there's, so much capacity for that heat. So you have control of your miners, which allows you more control of your finances and more control of your operations. And that's kind of like the overarching concept on all of it. Now, we have done a ton of R&D over the course of 3 years, and I'm sure that Chase has zapped some miners. I also wanted to explain specifically,
I'm ashamed.
Was it transformer fluid or transformer oil is not BitCool. And the transformer fluid that people are like, oh, I put it in here and it's supposed to be fine for electrics, and then my miner fried 3 months later. That is not what it's for. And so you have all of these people that are trying to DIY it, Chase being one of them. When he started, he was like, well, why the heck didn't this work? Right. But it's, people use their own human mistakes and analysis to come to conclusions that it's scientifically impossible, versus with us, we've done, a bunch of projects across many megawatts that shows that things are going great. Our first client is still as happy as ever. And so, we have great relationships with those people, and it also allows your hardware actually to live on average like 50% longer, because you're not having the boards themselves have as much heat in a centralized location. It can disperse easier. So there's a bunch of benefits.
Yeah, but it's a lot safer too. So there hasn't been a lot of talk about this yet. I'm sure it'll come out in the not too distant future. But some of the newer gen, can I say their names? The manufacturer?
Sure.
I'm talking trash.
From China.
Yeah, some
From
of the
China.
newer gen stuff on silicone PCBs. That'll narrow it down. They're struggling. They're struggling with these smaller nanometer chips are just very fragile, right? So on air, you have these little tiny traces inside of those chips and across the PCB as well. The printed circuit board for PCB. So the closer those are together, the easier it is for voltage to jump from trace to trace, short out, and basically fry your miner. We have been testing side by side, both in immersion and air, these units, and we'll basically, this is part of what my job is all the time. I'm constantly pushing things to the limit as far as I can push it, and then I have a subset of those that I also run at normal conditions. I have a subset that I run with no firmware on them, just what it comes with emulators on the immersion side, and just dust filters on the air side. And what we've seen is that on these 7 nanometer chips, the air side is just struggling. I mean, they are dropping like flies. And on the immersion side, they're perfectly happy. So their boards aren't dying and stuff like that. So I might be incorrect here, but my assumption is that because the dielectric fluid prevents any of those little short jumps in from trace to trace and shorts, and just overall keeps the temperature at a certain temperature all the time, never changes. Like day night cycle of the temperatures going up and down with air. That's bad for your because it's expanding and contracting.
It's killed many of my machines. I'd wake up in the morning and 3 would be down. I'm like,
oh no. Yeah.
Somebody from F2 Pool says enjoying listening to Chase and Nathan.
Nice.
About immersions. Okay, cool.
F2 Pool is a great, by the way. F2 Pool is a great pool as well. Thomas is their head of business development. Have only had good things to say about them too. There is a small part of us that is, like, go Team North America, but besides that fact, we use them for a myriad of different reasons, and also in specific risk tolerance perspectives of different firms that we work with. We make sure to split hash rate. So our top 2 choices are NovaBlock and F2 Pool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, we're at the end of our time here, and I think why don't you guys just tell us how our listeners can contact you, how they could find you?
Yeah, sure. So first off, let me just say, just for a little bit of time, that we are at capacity for all of our future developments right now. We are working on a lot of projects, and it's hard to keep Chase in with all of the different work that he's doing. So we're calling it right here for right now, because we first and foremost care about our partners and our relationships, and want to make sure that we're giving an A+ effort on everything. And so we can't spread ourselves too thin. However,
that's a good position to be in.
Yeah, very blessed. But but besides that,
both me and Scott want to have this problem.
But besides that fact, there's a contact form on the immersionsystems.io website. You can contact me on Telegram, also LinkedIn or anything like that. I'm generally pretty easy to look up. I think my name on Telegram is @Nathan_Imperium Partners. And Chase, what about you?
So on Telegram, I'm at Anamorphic, old gamer handle. And then email, you can always get me there, or on our website as well. don't think I'm gonna put my personal email out there though.
No, no more noise for Chase.
Yeah,
I am drowning.
No.
Don't email me.
Okay, don't contact Chase. Nathan is your gatekeeper, right?
Right.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, hey guys, I really enjoyed talking with you and learning with you today. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks a
Pleasure,
lot,
guys.
guys. Appreciate
Had a
it.
lot of fun.
Before we break, how much time do we have left?
30
We're-
seconds.
30 seconds. Oh man, I was gonna say if y'all had anything y'all wanted to update us on.
Well,
You
what
had
do
some
we have to
interesting
share,
things
Ethan?
going on. Drama.
Yes, well, there is a lot of drama going on right now on Telegram. Yeah, actually, Telegram is where Ethan and I do most of our business. It's interesting. For some reason, a lot of crypto people hang out there. But yeah, there's been some drama about the different firmware developers, you know, and people making
For
threats.
wars.
And, yeah.
Firmware.
So visit t.me/firm wars with a Z on the end, and you can kind of get a little bit on the juicy gossip there.
All right.
Yeah,
It is. It's like
Awesome.
watching a bloodbath in slow motion.
yeah.
Try
just-
not to take it too personally.
Yeah, and turn off your notifications on your phone, Chase. Otherwise, Nathan's gonna go over there and try to strangle you.
All right, guys. Thank you for having us. I
All
appreciate
right,
it.
take care, guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.